right, we are back on the record. And we are now ready to hear our fourth item for today. That is the matter of the petition. Microphone is not on. There we go. And that matter is a petition for reinstatement of Sheila Shalati. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
The OAH number for this matter is 2022-090544. The case number for this matter is 600-221-001-066. May I take the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General, please?
Ryan Yates, representing the people, Deputy Attorney General.
Okay, and may I have the appearance of the petitioner?
Yes, Sheila Shalati.
And petitioner's counsel?
And good afternoon, Your Honor, honorable board members and staff. Kevin Cawley on behalf of petitioner Sheila Shalati.
Good afternoon. These matters are being heard before the Board of Psychology. Will all the members of the board please identify themselves for the record?
Dr. Cheryl Kasuga, board member.
Julie Nystrom, board member.
Dr. Stephen Phillips, board member.
Dr. Leah Tate, board president.
Seiran Fu, board member.
Dr. Shakonda Rogers, board member.
Dr. Marisela Cervantes, board member.
Dr. Mary Harb Sheets, board member.
Ana Rescate, board member.
Okay, thank you very much. It appears we have a quorum present. My name is Ed Washington. I'm an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I have been assigned to preside over these matters, or this matter. I will not go into instructions in terms of how we will proceed, since we have legal counsel here representing Dr. Shalati. And so with that said, Mr. Yates, I'm ready for your presentation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deputy Attorney General Ryan Yates. I'm appearing on behalf of the Attorney General of the State of California. I am here to assist the panel in this fact-finding hearing. My role is not adversarial, but is intended to protect the public interest and to ensure that the panel have adequate information to make an informed decision. So I'll now ask that Exhibits 1 through 14 be identified and marked and entered into evidence.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and give us a brief description of what each of those exhibits are, and then we can address their admissibility.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Exhibit 1 is the accusation beginning at AGO 1. Exhibit 2 is a certificate of licensure beginning at AGO 7. Exhibit 3 is the petition for reinstatement for case 600-2021-001066, starting at AGO 8. Exhibit 4 is investigation report 1F-2012-222962, beginning at AGO 19. Exhibit 5 is the decision and order for 1F-2012-222962 at AGO 27. Exhibit 6 is the petition beginning at AGO 40. Exhibit 7, the narrative statement of Dr. Sheila Shalati at AGO 43. Exhibit 8 is the petition. It's labeled as the petition, but probably better described as the question and answer section of the petition. Exhibit 10 is the certificates of successful completion of coursework beginning at AGO 54. Exhibit 11 is the authorizations for release of information at AGO 64. Exhibit 12, the forensic profile for the fitness to practice evaluation at AGO 66. Exhibit 13, letters of support at AGO 99. Exhibit 14 is the investigative interview at AGO 112. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. There are actually 16 exhibits. Exhibit 15, questions answered by respondent's therapist at AGO 152. And Exhibit 16, notice of hearing at AGO 158.
All right, thank you very much. And I will note that you submitted a request for a protective order, and I think we talked about this in some of the other cases as well. But for this particular case, I believe the protective order is sought specifically with respect to Exhibit 12?
That's correct, Your Honor. And
And I believe you provided me a fully redacted version as well.
right, the public materials are fully redacted. I can also give opposing counsel a chance if there's any materials that you would request be redacted or, protected.
Okay, well, let's focus specifically on Exhibit 12 is what I'd like to do first. From what I gather, at least for the redacted version, it has no information whatsoever in the redacted version, but you'd like me to review as part of the petition the unredacted version, correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right. So I think my inclination would be to grant the order, just in case there's ever a challenge or a writ or anything of that nature, that the record is clear as to what was reviewed. Mr. Cawley, you have any objection or concern with respect to the request?
No objection, Your Honor.
To seal Exhibit 12? Okay. Exhibit 12 shall be sealed. I guess at this point I'll say Exhibit 12 is admitted, and there shall be a sealing order issued consistent with the request. Counsel asked whether or not there were other components of the exhibits that you might want to have protected, Mr. Cawley. Anything off the top of your head?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. You have any objection to Exhibits 1 through 14 being admitted?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Each of those documents are admitted as there is no objection.
And sorry, Your Honor, there's also the 15 and 16 on page 2, which I failed to earlier mention.
Once again, please.
Exhibit 15 and 16 on that second page of the table of contents.
Oh, in terms of it being admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Any objection to Exhibits 15 and 16?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibits 15 and 16 are admitted as well as there is no objection. You may continue, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. So to give a brief overview to the board, Dr. Sheila Shalati has petitioned for reinstatement of her surrendered California psychologist license, which was originally issued on January 4th, 2011. The surrender of the license became effective on March 4th, 2016. Now, I'd like to summarize the background of this matter, beginning with the license history. Petitioner was first registered by the board in March 2009, receiving her registered psychological assistant registration from March 19th, 2009 to December 15th, 2010, and that registration number was 34234, where she worked in Long Beach. Her registered psychological assistant registration was renewed April 16th, 2009 to January 31st, 2010. That registration number was 34277, where she worked in Los Angeles. And the registered psychological assistant registration was renewed a final time from October 25th, 2010 to January 4th, 2011 under number 35532, where she practiced in Westlake Village. Petitioner's education and work history is as followed. Dr. Shalati received her Bachelor's of Art degree in psychology in 2001. She then received her Master's of Psychology in 2007 and her Doctor of Psychology in 2009. She was a practicum trainee from 2006 to 2008 at the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center in Hollywood and the Juvenile Justice Facility in Ventura. She performed her internship at the City of Orange Juvenile Drug Court from 2008 to 2009. She worked as a psychological assistant at the Center for Discovery in Whittier, California from 2010 to 2012. She was the co-owner, and I believe still is co-owner of Vantage and program director of Vantage Point Recovery and Counseling Center in Westlake Village and the Chief Operating Officer of Seasons Recovery Centers, LLC in Malibu since 2011. On February 4th, 2015, the Board of Psychology filed accusation number 1F-2012-222962 against petitioner that alleged violations of Section 2960C and 726 of the Business and Professions Code for sexual misconduct with a patient, as well as violations under Section 2960 for gross negligence and 726 and 2960 of the Business Professions Code for unprofessional conduct. The factual basis is as follows. On or about January 5th, 2012, a patient who we're going to call CC contacted Vantage Point Recovery Center. On January 11th, 2012, a meeting was held where CC discussed her history of marital and alcohol problems. Following the meeting, petitioner sent CC an email where she was welcome to the center and confirming that she would begin treatment on January 18th, 2012. On January 13th, 2012, CC began treatment with a psychiatrist associated with Vantage Point. Petitioner and CC continued email exchanges with each other regarding health and sobriety-related topics. However, on January 19th, 2012, petitioner provided CC with her personal email address. On January 20th, 2012, it was recommended that CC begin inpatient treatment. CC contacted petitioner, the director at Seasons Inpatient Recovery Center. Petitioner then drove CC to Seasons from Thousand Oaks, California to Malibu, California. CC left Seasons and continued rehabilitation at Vantage Point. During this time, she became increasingly dependent on petitioner, with whom CC exchanged emails, text messages throughout the day. The relationship between CC and petitioner became increasingly intimate and inappropriate and exceeded the boundaries of the physician-therapist relationship. Petitioner shared personal information with CC, such as the fact that she is a lesbian, which CC is as well as a former cocaine addict, as well as details of prior childhood abuse with patient CC. Petitioner escalated the relationship with CC to that of a sexually intimate level. This was despite petitioner having knowledge that CC was married with children. CC eventually terminated the relationship and ceased contact with Vantage Point. After finding out about the above information, CC's then wife filed a complaint with the board. This resulted in accusation number 1F-2012-222962, which resulted in an executed stipulated surrender of license and a disciplinary order, which occurred on December 18th, 2015. This is where petitioner stipulated and agreed that there was a factual basis to the allegations of the accusation and that those charges constituted cause for discipline. Further, petitioner stipulated and agreed to give up her right to contest those charges for discipline, and that discipline existed based on those charges. The resulting order stated that petitioner, if she ever files for a petition for reinstatement, that resulted in the surrender of the license as well. Petitioner additionally stipulated that if she ever filed for a petition of reinstatement, that all the charges and all the allegations contained in the accusation shall be deemed true, correct, and admitted by the petition. It also stipulated and ordered petitioner to pay the board costs of the investigation and enforcement in the amount of $1,955 prior to the reinstatement of license. As previously stated, the effective date of the board's decision and order was on March 4th, 2016. On December 2nd, 2021, the board received a petition for reinstatement of a surrendered license application from petitioner. This was submitted along with the petition were attachments which we referred to earlier and admitted into evidence. On February 24th, 2022, the board notified Dr. Shalati that her petition for reinstatement request was being closed due to the petition packet being incomplete. The board advised in order to reopen the petition packet, the packet must include a missing 6 hours of continuing education. On or about March 18th, 2022, the board received the missing continuing education certificates. On May 2nd, 2022, Division of Investigations Special Agent Nicole Walker conducted an interview of petitioner. On May 5th, 2022, Investigator Walker completed her investigative report summarizing the petition and its attachments. And I believe that accurately summarizes the matter as of today's date. As this is a petition for penalty relief and reinstatement of a surrendered license, It is petitioner's burden to demonstrate that she is rehabilitated by clear and convincing evidence. Therefore, I have nothing further at this time, but I do reserve the right to cross-examine petitioner or call her as a witness if she does not choose to testify before making my recommendation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Yates. Mr. Cawley, now is your opportunity to present any evidence that you have on your client's behalf. However, I have not asked you yet whether or not you're willing to stipulate to electronic recording. We were scheduled to have a court reporter. As you, I'm sure, are aware, there's a shortage, at least from an OAH perspective. Are you willing to consent to electronic recording in lieu of utilizing a court reporter today?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You may proceed when ready.
And Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to call our sole witness, Dr. Sheila Shalati.
Okay, very well. Would you please raise your right hand, Dr. Shalati? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you provide today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may lower your hand, and you may begin when ready, counsel.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Dr. Shalati, you have a set of exhibits in front of you today, correct?
That is correct.
I'd now like to direct your attention to what's been entered into evidence as Exhibit 6. That's at pages 40 through 42, and it's titled A Petition for Reinstatement of Revoked Surrendered License. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
Okay. And also referring your attention to what's been admitted as Exhibits 7 through 13. That's at pages 43 to 111. Do you recognize these documents?
I do.
And are these documents you submitted in conjunction with your petition for penalty relief?
That is correct.
Dr. Shalati, could you briefly describe in your own words the circumstances that led to the surrender of your license?
I was a newly licensed psychologist working as an administrator at Vantage Point, an IOP facility I owned with my mom at the time. I had come in to help her help build the business. Around early January, we received communication from an individual that I recognized who was a celebrity wanting to seek outpatient services, IOP services. And as a result, we attempted to engage her in an intake, and I subsequently also further participated in this process, initially taking the phone call from her manager who wanted to ensure that she was being well taken care of and treated. And then subsequent to that, I participated in the intake with my mom, and then took personal responsibility to ensure that her treatment was being delivered properly and essentially overseeing her case at the time. During the course of that time, I began engaging with boundary crossings with her, including the sharing of my personal email and my phone number. We engaged in regular communication over the course of the following month or so, which then led to a sexual relationship that lasted approximately a month or so as well, and then subsequently her wife discovering, and then the allegation and complaint being filed.
Okay. And just to clarify, when was the last time you had any interaction with this patient?
To my best recollection, it would have been in or around April of 2012.
Were you experiencing any personal or professional stressors at the time of the violation?
Yes, I was newly engaged with Seasons Recovery Centers at the time. I had just taken over as the chief operating officer, and they were in the middle of a reorganization. So it required an excessive amount of my attention and work on a daily basis, up to 12, 14 hours a day. I was also in a relatively new relationship, and of course, just not addressed my own trauma at the time, so trying to just kind of reconcile work-life balance, and it certainly contributed.
How long had you been licensed as a psychologist at the time the violation occurred?
Probably about a year.
Approximately how long did the violation go on? How long did it last?
The direct violation of the sexual misconduct lasted approximately, to my best recollection, about 4 or 5 weeks, I would say.
And prior to the board filing the accusation against you, did you reach out for any assistance or seek consult from anyone in regard to this violation
Prior to the filing?
of the accusation?
No, I did not.
Do you believe that your actions may have resulted in harm to the patient?
I do.
Dr. Shalati, you ultimately surrendered your license, correct?
That is correct.
Was that surrender voluntary?
It was.
How do you feel about the conduct that ultimately resulted in you voluntarily surrendering your license?
I feel horrible. Even a decade later, I still reflect with great deal of remorse and regret and focus on the harm that I've created. So it makes my stomach turn thinking about it, even to this day.
Dr. Shalati, were you involved in a civil case in relation to the same incident?
I was.
Okay. And can you tell us what the outcome of that case was?
We had settled for $600,000.
And did you satisfy that settlement amount?
We did.
Were there any other terms or conditions tied to that settlement?
I believe it was no contact order.
Have you abided by the no contact order?
I have.
Dr. Shalati, since the surrender of your license, have you remained employed?
I have.
And where are you working?
Seasons Recovery Centers.
Okay. And in what capacity do you work at Seasons?
I'm the Chief Operating Officer.
Okay. And what are your roles and responsibilities as the Chief Operating Officer?
I oversee the general operational needs of the organization. I work closely with the CEO and the other C-level executives to review financials. I work with the other administrative managers in regards to compliance and oversight, as well as be able to address any employee-related issues.
And you worked at Seasons prior to the violation as well, correct?
I did.
Did you inform Seasons about your violation and the subsequent surrender of your license?
I did.
When did you notify your employer?
I want to say approximately within the year of the violation.
Okay. And do other employees at Seasons know about your violation and your license surrender?
They do.
And did you tell them?
I did.
Okay. And have you shared this fact with friends and colleagues as well?
I have.
So I know you mentioned earlier that CC, as we're referring to the patient, was a celebrity. In the time you've been employed at Seasons since 2012, have you had an opportunity to work with other celebrities?
I have.
Approximately how many celebrity clients would you say you've worked with?
Celebrity and high-profile clients, we've probably admitted 40, 50 since the accusation.
How would you describe your experience of remaining employed in the mental health field following the surrender of your psychology license?
Very difficult. The choice I made to stay in the field was done with a great deal of challenges and the necessity to pay attention and pay close attention to my own rehabilitation. So it's been a long, appropriate, and deliberate process of my own accountability, as well as confronting some very difficult instances where I was challenged with the public knowledge of my surrender and the events around the accusation. So having to work through those things in a professional capacity and still, demonstrate the level of integrity the organization obtains was very important to me.
Okay. And Dr. Shalati, have you engaged in any continuing education activities since you surrendered your license?
I have.
And did you submit evidence of that in conjunction with your petition for reinstatement?
I did.
Okay. And have you completed any continuing education in the areas of ethics, boundaries, or dual relationships?
Yes.
And have you completed hours in addition to those submitted with your petition?
Can you restate the question?
Sure. So you submitted some proof of continuing education with your petition, correct?
Correct.
Is there more that was not included in that submission?
There is.
Have you engaged in any volunteer activities since you surrendered your license?
Yes.
How old are you now?
44.
And are you married?
I am.
And how long have you been married?
My wife's going to kill me. 8 years, not to be 9 in March. She's really going to kill me.
And do you have children?
We do.
How old are your kids?
5 and to be 21 months in 3 days.
Dr. Shalati, have you engaged in any therapy?
Oh, yes, yes.
Just please describe your efforts with respect to therapy since you surrendered your license.
My therapy has been consistent even prior to surrendering my license. I re-engaged with a previous therapist probably about a year after the accusation, and we continued with individual therapy on a weekly basis. And then throughout that time, my wife and I also obtained a couples therapist, both of whom I still continue to see, both of whom I am continuing to be consistent with, both of whom I have no intention of ever not being without.
And what is the name of your the therapist that conducts your individual therapy?
Dr. Janet Kelly.
And did you sign a release for Dr. Kelly in connection with your petition for penalty relief?
I did.
Okay. How often do you see Dr. Kelly?
Now, in the past 2 years, I see her every other week and switch off with our couples therapist on the off weeks.
How would you describe your current support system, if any?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm fortunate. I have an extraordinarily supportive professional community. I have great support within my family system, good, close friends, and just a general, support of my therapist and consultant.
Have you completed any coursework related to boundary violations for mental health professionals?
I have.
Could you describe the work you've completed?
Yeah, I did a 3-day boundary course with PBI down in Irvine. There was a 24-hour course that was then followed with a 3-month-long weekly meeting. I believe the meetings were roughly an hour or 2. I don't remember exactly. But the coursework itself consisted of reading materials, writing, being able to engage and review the various accusations of the different professionals that were there, as well as both experiential and didactic integration.
Okay. And directing your attention to what's been marked as AGO 61, if you have that page in front of you, does that, let me know when you have that document.
I have it.
Okay. And does this document reference the PBI professional boundaries course you completed?
It does.
Have you faced any challenges since you surrendered your license?
Yes. Yeah, as I had mentioned before in my previous statements, I have indeed been confronted by instances where my offense has come to light in a professional environment, one in particular in which a previous season's client had disclosed the events to my entire staff of 78 people. So that was probably the most prominent one in which I had to work through.
Dr. Shalati, what does rehabilitation mean to you?
A lot, but it's really about accountability, consistency, insight, the willingness to engage in difficult and challenging work, the willingness to do whatever it takes to ensure that that work stays intact and in place, that there is oversight, that you are demonstrating not just in your professional but in your personal life ways in which you have become rehabilitated, and being able to, exhibit the person that you hope you want to be and the professional I certainly want to be. But it's for me in particular, it's been a great deal of reflection, hard work, money spent, hours spent, committing for the last decade, and continuing to commit without any intention to stop.
Dr. Shalati, did you seek any type of psychological evaluation in connection with your petition for penalty relief?
I did.
And where did you seek that evaluation?
At the Acumen Institute in Kansas.
And if I could direct your attention now to what's been entered as Exhibit 12, starting on page 66. Okay. So you stated you had an evaluation at Acumen in Kansas. How long was the evaluation?
4 days.
And what did it entail?
Several interviews, psychological assessments, as well as a lie detector test with the multidisciplinary assessment team.
And was a report generated at the conclusion of that evaluation?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the document contained within Exhibit 13?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is your understanding of Acumen's recommendation with respect to your ability to safely practice again as a psychologist?
My understanding is that they are in favor of my return as a professional and find me to be fit to return.
Dr. Shalati, can you give us your best estimate of how much time you've dedicated to your rehabilitation?
I think I'm in the thousands, to be honest. Yeah, I mean it's hundreds, and that's just the commitment of engaging in that. So maybe not thousands, but it's definitely several hundreds of hours.
Are you prepared to comply with any terms and conditions the board may impose should they decide to grant your petition for reinstatement?
I am.
And if the board does reinstate your license, what are your plans?
My first plan would be to re-engage with my consultant, Dr. Pamela Harmel, who has agreed, should I be reinstated, to continue as participating in the oversight and ability to facilitate my ongoing kind of supervision. That would be the first thing. And then I would consult with her and go from there.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Cross-examination, Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is this your first attempt at petitioning for reinstatement?
It is, Mr. Yates.
And do you have any reason why it's been about a decade or so? Why now are you deciding to petition for reinstatement?
Yes, I actually considered it sooner when the 3-year time limit would permit me to. But when I went to the 3-day course at PBI and I was able to sit in a room full of other health professionals and recognize how far I'd actually come, it was quite an epiphany for me because I knew the arduous task of having to petition. It wasn't just submitting this, it was continuing to, demonstrate. And I saw myself having grown on a level that almost took a step back and reflected on whether or not I wanted to go through this process anymore. At the time, I was successful in my career. And I think it was, something that I wanted to always demonstrate my rehabilitation earlier on. But that was a very pivotal point for me to recognize, like, wow, I've really grown and done some incredible work, so much so that the director of the organization asked me to come and train for them because he really appreciated my perspective and my lens. So I took a pause at that point. We just had our daughter, sooner, and then we kind of jumped into COVID. So for me, this time around, at this point in time, the timing felt right, and I felt as though I really wanted to demonstrate the level of rehabilitation I've achieved.
So regardless of however the board decides, whatever direction they decide to go in, do you plan on continuing to avail yourself to the coursework and other type of, personal growth journeys that you presented to us in this petition?
I do.
And as we sit here today, are you disputing any of the charges that were originally filed against you in the accusation?
I am not.
Okay. I also had a sort of a lengthy discussion of kind of what led us here today. Did that seem accurate to you? And if not, do you want to correct me on anything?
Nope, that was accurate.
Do you accept responsibility for the actions that led to the surrender of your license?
I do.
Now, if you got your license back, how would your practice at Seasons change?
I don't believe it would change at this point in time. Like I mentioned before, I would seek through consultation what would be the best course if I am to re-engage in personal practice. But my duties and responsibilities at Seasons remain intact regardless.
Okay. Do you see any problems with being the COO as well as a psychologist who may or may not be on probation while working there?
I do not.
Okay. Would you be willing to avail yourself to a workside monitor who isn't under your employ?
I would.
And you mentioned that if you received your license from the board, you said you'd be willing to participate in probation. Would that include exam requirements?
Yes.
Probation monitoring?
Yes.
All right. Worksite monitoring?
Yes.
Okay. And anything the board, I guess, throws your way?
I am willing to accept any parameters which the board sees fit.
Okay. Currently, does your day-to-day include supervising psychologists or psych techs or psych assistants?
It does not.
As part of your duties, do you engage in the practice of psychology?
I do not.
Do you provide any sort of therapy?
I do not.
Or any sort of counseling?
I do not.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier you're no longer at Vantage Point.
So Vantage Point is now under the umbrella of Seasons Recovery Centers. So I essentially oversee both operations. We bought my mom out, just FYI.
How would you, if you were to receive your license, how would you incorporate that into your current practice as the CEO of Seasons?
Like I mentioned before, I'm unsure. I think that's something I would have to be thoughtful and considerate about the circumstances of that, and I would consult with Dr. Harmel very closely about the parameters for that.
So I'd like to move on just to discuss briefly the relationship with CC. Can you identify when that relationship became inappropriate?
To the best of my recollection, I want to say it was around, let me take a step further back. if I'm thinking about inappropriate in terms of my professional responsibility, the moment that I decided that I wanted to take a role of pleasing her and being kind of managing, her admission to Vantage Point. So that would be probably from the course of when I met with her in the intake, that my professional duty was departed from.
And were you aware at that time that you were engaging in some boundary violations?
I was not.
When did you begin to become aware that you were engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a patient?
When we started having sexual interaction.
And you mentioned earlier this was the first of its kind?
That is correct.
Right. Now, knowing what you know, were there any other boundary issues with any other patients that come to mind? I guess being removed from your license for a period of time?
No.
And I was going to ask you some questions about your therapy, but I think you discussed that pretty well. Have there been any differences since submitting your petition regarding your therapy activity?
Yes, I talk a lot more about my children and parenting and what to do.
And frequency-wise, has that increased or decreased?
It's remained pretty consistent for the past 2 years.
Okay.
In terms of the every other week, we went from weekly to every other week. And like I said, we meet with our couples therapists on the off weeks.
Right, so weekly, some form of therapy.
Absolutely.
Can you describe the sort of personal therapy, the individualized therapy that you engage in?
Would you describe, can you give me a little more, like what kind of orientation she works in? She is a very skilled trauma therapist. So she works from various perspectives, integrating interventions, mostly exposure-related therapies such as EMDR, brain spotting, which are evidence-based approaches to support trauma processing. We've also done various types of other intervention strategies such as cognitive behavioral therapy, some dialectical behavioral therapy. So she, and more recently, internal family systems. So yeah, she's pretty integrative.
And this therapist, you and her have been seeing each other for 2 years?
No, we've been seeing each other for 10 years, consistently. I had began with her when I was 27 and was with her, I would say, probably about 3 years. I ended up moving for a few years and did not continue therapy, and then picked it back up when I was around 33 and when this incident happened.
Now, you mentioned as part of a settlement that you were not, you agreed not to reach out to CC. Do you have any knowledge as to whether CC or her wife supports or opposes this petition for reinstatement?
I have no knowledge.
And you mentioned in your personal statement that you've ceased drinking. Is that still accurate?
That is accurate.
Are you participating in AA at all?
Well, I'm surrounded by it often, so I have as a result of my position and job and having friends in recovery, but I'm not active in AA, no.
Okay. Had you been active in AA at all?
No.
All right. Do you have a date of sobriety?
I do not. I stopped around December of 2019.
And it is mentioned in the petition that you took a polygraph examination as well. Do you mind just explaining that a little further?
It's nerve-wracking. There was a series of questions that were asked by the agent, and they had hooked me up to, I believe, kind of these vital monitors, as well as kind of ways that they assess whether or not I'm being truthful. And he went through a series of questions as an FBI agent would, and I believe I answered those successfully. And I never want to do it again.
Now, you don't have your license currently. Are you involved in any sort of community work or additional coursework which wasn't submitted that I guess is tertiary to the practice of psychology in some way?
I am, and I think just organizationally, I'm engaged in a lot of continuing education in terms of the oversight and organizational needs.
Right. Your Honor, at this time, we submit with nothing further.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, we'll take questions from the board. Unless there was additional redirect, Mr. Colley.
If I may, just very briefly, Your Honor.
Sure.
Dr. Shalati, have you ever been diagnosed with an alcohol or substance use disorder?
I have not.
And you have been under the care of a mental health professional since you were 27 years old, correct?
That is correct.
Dr. Shalati, directing you back to the evaluation you had, if I could now direct your attention to page 91, which is within the Acumen assessment. I want to ask you a couple of questions about the polygraph examination you underwent.
I'm sorry, what page was that?
91, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Shalati, I believe you testified that you were successful in respect to undergoing the polygraph test. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so did you mean that by being successful, your responses were truthful?
That is correct.
Dr. Shalati, do you recall the two questions you were asked in connection with the polygraph examination?
I believe these are the two questions that they asked. That is on the document.
Would you read the two questions?
Of course. And
along with responses.
Of course. Other than CC, have you ever had sexual contact with a current or former patient? My answer was no. Second question, other than CC, have you ever taken steps to interact privately with a patient for the purpose of pursuing intimacy? My answer was no.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. So now we'll take questions from the board. President Tate, any questions?
No questions for me. Thank you for coming, Dr. Shalati.
Thank you, Dr. Tate.
All right, Vice President Fu?
I just have one question. When Dad Gates asked about whether there would be a conflict between your COO role and you also being a practicing psychologist at the firm, could you share with us your thinking about why there wouldn't be a conflict, especially given the boundary violations and multiple roles background that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it not as a practicing psychologist within the organization, but simply obtaining the license as part of just my credential. So I don't foresee, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to practice psychology. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Kasuga.
Thank you for being here today. I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Dr. Cervantes?
I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Sheets.
Thank you for being here, being so open with us. I have no questions.
Thank you.
All right, Member Nystrom?
Thank you for being here, and I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, I have a few questions for you, Dr. Shalati. During the time you were in graduate school, I assume you took a course in law and ethics.
Oh, I did, yes.
And in that course in law and ethics, did you find out that having sexual relationships with a client was the most egregious kind of ethical violation?
I did.
So you started to have contact with this client in 2012.
Yes.
And you cut off the relationship after 4 or 5 sexual intimacies?
I can't recall exactly the ending of the relationship. I know that there was mutual concern regarding continuing the relationship, and there were attempts to terminate contact, but there was difficulty for that contact to be fully ended. Mm-hmm. So it really ended when her wife found out.
Okay. And at that point, I think you said you went back into therapy.
Not exactly at that point, but probably within the year, yes.
Within a year?
Yes, correct.
And your license was not suspended until 2016? 16.
Correct.
Did you continue to see patients over that course of time?
Very seldomly.
Can you tell me approximately how many patients you saw over that course of time?
I would imagine probably not more than 4 or 5.
And what was your thinking in continuing to see patients?
It was really out of necessity and need for the organization if we were down a therapist or, the census had gone up. So I just kind of came in to help out. Or I had, if I had a client that I had in practice, or I was seeing maybe 1 or 2 of them ongoing, which is why I sought consultation.
And you saw consultation with Dr. Harmel?
I did.
And what did she suggest to you?
Well, several things. I mean, we met fairly consistently. So we would review my cases. We would discuss ethical and legal considerations. She would discuss and want me to identify how I'm interacting with them. So she was heavily involved in my...
And she was aware of the prior boundary violation?
She very much was, yes.
Okay. But you continued to hold your psychology license until the complaint was filed, correct?
I did.
Okay. Was it your intention at that point to continue to practice psychology if there'd been no complaint?
At the time, in the first probably 2 years of that, I was deep in my own rationalization of this, to be honest. So I think my thinking at the time, in addition to a deep sense of panic, anxiety, and just reflection, but I also was heavy in my own trauma and unable to, I think, really, identify and say at that time period, yes, this is, I'm going to surrender at this point in time. I think, had it not, it's hard to speculate and it would be conjecture, but I can tell you that I was very deep in my rationalization at the time.
And what was the rationalization?
That I wasn't her therapist. I wasn't her direct therapist. I was a director. I was, my role was not one which included a professional responsibility. It was stupid.
Can you think of anything worse than what you did in terms of violating a client's trust?
I cannot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Member Rascati?
Thank you. I have no questions.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Rogers?
Hi, Dr. Shalati. Thank you for being here. Originally, I didn't have any questions, but one just occurred to me thinking about Dr. Phillips and his questions. Can you speak about your reflections on the type of harm your actions have caused?
I smile when I'm nervous, and when I read this accusation, it's like I'm reading about a different person. This level of harm I think about often, and as hard as it is to do that, I know it's incredibly important. Not only did I harm the client, I harmed her wife, I harmed her children, I took away her sense of trust, of safety. I've completely violated her, if not reenacted her trauma. This is something I deeply understand and recognize, and don't take 1 second to minimize or dismiss the extraordinary and probably everlasting harm that's been done to her and her family. So I'm very well aware that this is, as Dr. Phillips had mentioned, there's no worse thing. And I know that, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life.
Thank you very much. No more questions.
Sorry. Any redirect, Mr. Collins?
No, Your Honor.
Any additional questions, Mr. Yates?
Nothing here, Your Honor.
Okay, then I think now will be the appropriate time to hear closing arguments. We could take a short break, but considering the time, if everybody's comfortable with it, we can just push through.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I'm ready, and you may proceed, Mr. Collins, when ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're incredibly fortunate that we live in a state and we're dealing with a profession here today that recognizes clearly that individuals have the ability to change and change for the better. Similarly, California law looks with favor upon rewarding the opportunity to serve one who has achieved, quote, reformation and regeneration, end quote. That's a California Supreme Court case. It's Pacheco, Pacheco versus State Bar. It's a 1987 case at 43 Cal 3rd, 1041. The evidence submitted in connection with Dr. Shalati's petition for reinstatement, as well as the testimony you've heard today, clearly establish that Sheila Shalati has reformed and regenerated herself. Acknowledging and taking responsibility for the wrongfulness of prior actions is an essential step of rehabilitation. That's acknowledged by the California Supreme Court in the case of SEIDE, S-E-I-D-E, versus Committee of Bar Examiners, which is a 1989 California Supreme Court case at 49 Cal 3rd, 993. Dr. Shalati has clearly taken responsibility for her acts. She took responsibility by settling her civil case, by surrendering her psychology license, and most importantly, by dedicating the last 10 years to a painstaking plan of remediation. She has clearly expressed remorse for her conduct. As the board is also aware, California courts have held that sustained conduct over an extended period of time is a true indication of rehabilitation. That's In Re Menna, M-E-N-N-A. It is a 1995 case at 11 Cal 4th, 975. Further, the significance of misconduct is greatly diminished by the passage of time and by the absence of similar, more recent misconduct. That's Kwasnik, K-W-A-S-N-I-K versus State Bar, 50 Cal 3rd at 1061. It has been over 10 years since the conduct in this case occurred. It has been over 6 years since Dr. Shalati voluntarily surrendered her license. During that time, she has had no subsequent acts or crimes. Moreover, a polygraph conducted at Acumen ruled out any other similar violations, which is frequently the board's concern in cases such as this. For the past 10 years, Dr. Shalati has engaged in therapy, both individual as well as family. She has engaged in additional continuing education units despite the fact that she surrendered her license. She voluntarily enrolled in a boundaries course that is approved by many boards around the country and sought out a forensic evaluation at one of the nation's leading evaluation facilities for healthcare professionals accused of any type of sexual misconduct. She has been open and candid throughout this process, and her reinstatement is strongly supported and advocated by not one, but two licensed psychologists. Dr. Janet Kelly, who is the therapist who provides individual therapy to Dr. Shalati, responded to the board at page AGO 153 that she strongly supports Dr. Shalati's ability to resume practice as a psychologist. Moreover, Dr. Peter Graham at Acumen, I'm going to just selectively quote here at page AGO 97, opined that the undersigned and those individuals in this evaluation are of the opinion within a reasonable degree of psychological certainty that Dr. Shalati is fit to practice psychology with psychological skill, insight, self-regulation, and commitment to personal accountability. End quote. Further down on that page, he also remarks, she has achieved a level of professional perspective and circumspection that results in her probably being at a lower risk of future misconduct than the average practitioner. She has developed a highly informed understanding of the ethics and the parameters of professional boundary maintenance. Dr. Shalati is also supported by numerous other friends, colleagues, and coworkers who wrote letters that are attached to her petition. Each of these individuals are well aware of the facts and circumstances that resulted in the loss of her license, but nonetheless support reinstatement. Finally, it should be noted that the board has the opportunity and likely will reinstate Dr. Shalati's license under terms and conditions of probation if it decides to grant reinstatement. That probation will allow the board to further assure itself and the public of Dr. Shalati's ability to safely practice while also continuing to assist with Dr. Shalati's continued rehabilitation. We respectfully request that this agency enter an order granting Dr. Shalati's petition for reinstatement. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Yates, you have a recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. You know, we largely agree with what Mr. Colley said. Dr. Shalati has done a great deal of therapy and coursework, presents herself as intelligent, remorseful, accepting of responsibility, and is engaging in these courseworks and therapy. Also, good recommendations by 2 psychological professionals. However, you know, these recommendations, their job isn't to protect the public. That's the board's job. And the 2 issues that my office has is, one, just the seriousness of the misconduct, which has been stated earlier that this is one of the worst things that you can do as a psychologist. And it is a large ceiling to get through, to get over that and get past that. I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm not saying it's insurmountable, and I'm not saying this is a license that should never be reinstated. But then the second issue, I think, is I would have liked to see just a little bit more discussion of the harm caused in addition to the rehabilitative efforts. You know, we are talking about a patient who put her trust in this person, and to her detriment, as well as the detriment of her family and the profession as well. So those are just the 2 things, and that's why, you know, in these things, sometimes I very strongly have reservations. This is not one of those, but we do have our reservations, and we encourage Dr. Shalati to just continue on this path, continue working on yourself. And I can see a reinstatement someday. Now, if the board decides to go against my office's recommendation, we do recommend a probationary term, a term of at least 7 years with worksite monitor, possible exam requirements, maybe even additional coursework in ethics and boundary violations, although as we have seen, there has been considerable coursework. Additionally, I would just defer to the board with any other terms that they find necessary in the event that the board decides to grant the reinstatement of the license. And with that, we submit. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear, so your recommendation is a denial, and as an alternative, if the board sees otherwise, 7 years of probation with a worksite monitor and related coursework in ethics and boundaries.
Correct, Your Honor.
Just wanted to be sure we had that on the record. All right. There is nothing else?
No, Your Honor.
Then the matter is submitted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The board will meet in closed session to discuss disciplinary matters, including petitions for reinstatement, modifications, early termination, proposed decisions, stipulations, petitions for reconsideration, and remands. We will only be coming back to open session after closed session is completed to adjourn the meeting for today, and that will not be webcast. So thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break. Oh.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we do start closed session, but we take roll first, and then we'll roll into closed session tomorrow morning, and we do start tomorrow at 9:30. So thank you for that reminder.